Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to another True Crime Time with Junebug. That's me. And, it's not actually a true crime. It's part of my new mini-series called Badass Ladies. If you notice, I am filming a bit different setup here. I still have my lovely backgrounds that I painstakingly worked on for hours. Behind me because I didn't like the corner behind me, and I'm actually sitting in a chair, much better for my 24-year-old lady body. And I know you're gonna hear that and be like, ma'am, come on. But I sit here for a while recording these, and I'm usually on the floor and it hurts, so I want to sit in a chair, and maybe this looks better. I mean, I'm trying the cinematic filming thing, so it's gonna blur a bit around me. Hopefully it doesn't affect when I edit. But today we are talking about another badass lady, and I do want to just mention that yes, it involves another island, because that's the rabbit hole I fell down. People leaving ladies on islands, so here we go. So today we are going to talk about Ada Blackjack. Now, this takes place between September 1921 through August of 1923. And this takes place on Wrangel Island in Russia. And again, this is not like a real true crime, but it is solved. Nothing is like a mystery. Generally, it's not a mystery, no. There might be a point to it that might seem mysterious, but it's not like a mystery. Anyway, I do always, start out with pop culture references in case anyone's heard of this and they're like, oh, that. I didn't see any references. But there's a book called Ada Blackjack, A True Story of Survival in the Arctic. And this book was by Jennifer Niven. And basically, since there's a book, I think there's multiple, but this is the most prominent one I found, I will just basically be covering the quote-unquote cliff notes. Like, I'm obviously not going to get into as much detail as a full book, but here we go. Now, Ada, it may be pronounced differently, but I'm going to say Ada because I live near a town called Ada. So that's just how I say it. Maybe it's Ada, but it's going to come out Ada out of me because of just the way it was, the town near me. So I apologize if it's pronounced differently. Ada, she was born Ada Delutuk? It's Delutuk. She was born on May 10th of 1898, close to Solomon, Alaska. It's not in Solomon, but close to it. And she was I feel bad, I probably will not pronounce this correctly. She was Inupiat? That was like her people's name. It's not Inuit, so it's not that. It's Inupiat. Inupiat. Now, I could not find her father's name or her mother's name, but I found that she had a sister named Rita. So that's all I got basically for her family. And when Ada was 9, her father would unfortunately pass from food poisoning. And so her mom, I don't know if it was grief or it was a money issue, but she would send Ada and her younger sister Rita, I think it's younger sister, to a Methodist mission school in, I believe it's pronounced Nome, Alaska, Nome, where she was raised by missionaries and was taught English and how to sew. And that has a prominent point to this story. Now, at age 16, and remember this was a different time, Ada got married. She would marry a man named Blackjack. That was his name. And he was a local dog musher. And I don't know how old he was during their marriage. I assume he was older just based off of history and just my opinion. I assume he was older. I don't think he was like drastically older than her, but I could not find his age. Now, they would go on to have 3 children together, but unfortunately only one would survive past infancy, and that was their son, Bennett. Now, it was stated Jack was actually a horrible husband. Yeah, he would abuse Ada. I don't know if he would abuse their son at all, but like he would abuse her, he would starve her. Um, I don't know if Bennett was affected by this at all. Definitely by maybe seeing it, but I don't know if he was starved or abused himself. Now, Jack, the husband, Jack Blackjack, Ada's husband, father of Bennett, he, after 5 years of marriage, would abandon them in their home, which was on the Seward Peninsula. Now, because Ada is a badass lady, before waiting to see if her husband would actually return, she filed for divorce. But she obtained the divorce and she walked in Alaska 40 miles back to her mother's home in Nome. Back to her mother's home in Nome. She walked 40 miles carrying Bennett. Like periodically carrying him, mostly carrying him, let's be realistic. Because Bennett was not a healthy child, so he would get very tired very easily. So she carried him a lot of that 40 miles in the snow. But as well as just like a general not good health, he had tuberculosis, which is one of the main factors. She's like, I can't wait around to see if Jack comes back. Our son needs help. Also, because Jack was the main breadwinner, their money was essentially gone when he walked out on them. So she's like, okay, I gotta go. Bennett needs help, and this is very expensive to treat. So in the meantime, she made it to her mother's house. I don't know if she stayed with her, but to like try to pay for some of his tuberculosis treatments. She would clean houses, and she was doing a lot of sewing, which is what she was taught at the missionary. She would particularly sew a lot of clothes for miners, it said. I assume that meant like coal miners, like people mining for stuff, and not like young children, just to throw that out there. But she did a lot of sewing for miners, and she worked all the time, from what I could tell, to just try to earn enough money for his tuberculosis treatment. But unfortunately, it was not enough. So Ada had to give up her son, Bennett, to the Jesse Lee Home for Children, which is basically an orphanage. He was able to get some treatments there, which seems like it would break your heart. Like knowing, like you would feel like you didn't do enough. Which she's working her butt off. She was abandoned by her husband, like the kid's father. Like she's already walked 40 miles carrying him through the snow. Like she's doing the things. It's just not working in her favor. But I do want to know, because I was slightly confused, like where was her mom during this? It said she walked to her mom's house. I don't know, was she staying with her mom? Was the mom like, I ain't caring for that kid? Like, I don't know what's going on with the mom situation. Now, since she had to give up her son, she became committed to making that money, and as much money as she possibly could. I assume, given the fact that she had Bennett, she couldn't make every dollar possible because, you know, she had to take care of her son. So now that, unfortunately, she didn't have him, she was just going to dedicate everything to making money for his treatments and to be able to get him back. Now, knowing Ada and her situation, there was a police chief of Nome. His name was E.R. Jordan, and he mentioned some men were recruiting Inuits and Native Alaskans to help with a expedition. And that expedition was to go to Wrangel Island, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video. It stated the police chief didn't really know all it entailed. He just knew it would probably be a good fit because Ada needed money. She was like a Native Alaskan that they were like looking for, people who knew like icy cold terrain. And the fact that she did speak English, which I said it would come into play when she learned how to speak English and sew at the missionary. But they also needed a seamstress for all their like fur clothing. Like if anything got ripped or torn, or if they lost like a fur coat, she would be able to make or repair it. Now, Ada was chosen for the crew. She took the police chief's advice, like applied for this. I don't know how you quite apply for a sea voyage, but she was chosen by, I'm going to butcher this name, bear with me. She was hand-chosen for the crew by Vilhjalmur Stephenson. And he was the man who was financing, planning, and encouraging the voyage. So he was like head honcho for this voyage, and he handpicked her thinking she would be a great fit. And the reason he wanted to do this and go to Wrangel Island was because he believed, quote, the Arctic could be easily habitable for those willing to adapt, end quote. Which, I mean, the people live in Alaska. I mean, they seem to be doing it, but this is a different beast. It's in between Russia and Alaska. No one's living there. It's just ice, basically, and polar bears. I also want to mention that Ada is supposed to be getting $50 a month if she went on this voyage, which back then is ka-ching. So, I mean, sounds, I don't know about a great bargain, but I mean, it sounds like a way for her to make money to help her son. But I do want to mention, this Vilhjalmur Stephenson, he was not going on the voyage. He was staying behind to raise money for the next one he was planning. So this voyage, instead of being led by Stevenson, was led by Canadian explorer Alan Crawford. Now the other men on the voyage were Lorne Knight, Milton Gale, and Fred Moore. And Fred had spent 8 months on Wrangel Island already in 1914 after surviving a shipwreck. There's a whole thing about that ship that Maurer was on, that shipwrecked on that island. I'm not getting into it today. Not today. I don't know if ever, but you can go look it up if you want. I can link in the description below. But I noticed something in particular about this crew. The leader, Crawford, he was 20 years old, the head of the voyage. That's 4 years younger than me. Sure, he may have been trained for this, but that seems insane. Now, Knight, he was 28, which was the oldest one. Well, okay, Maurer was also 28, but still. The oldest person, the most experienced person, is 28 years old on this voyage. Gale, he's 19, and Ada is about 23 at this time. They are all 20s or younger. I feel like that's insane to me. Now, you may have mentioned I only mentioned 5 people. You're right, that was the whole crew. It was 5 people and the ship's cat. Now, she was the only woman, as you could have guessed from those names, and she was the only Native Alaskan on the crew. And this made her upset because she was led to believe there would be other Native Alaskans on this crew, and there might even be other women. That was not the case. Again, Stephenson, he's a bit sketchy, but given this, she would still proceed anyways because she was accepted. She's like, I need the money, let's go. Now, on September 15th of 1921, the team was left on Wrangel Island. Now, they were left there essentially to claim the island for Canada or the UK. Again, the sketchiness of Stephenson, I'm not quite sure what his goal was there, but it explicitly said it's either for Canada or the UK. Now, if you remember from the beginning of the episode, it actually currently belongs to Russia. It's some foreshadowing for the rest of the story. And I don't know the terms for claiming an island for the Canada or the UK, but from the way it sounds, they had to stay there a year. And honestly, things seem to do okay. I didn't see like a ton of in detail stuff. Again, that might be more in the book I mentioned at the beginning of the video. But things were honestly pretty well, as it can be on a frozen island with 5 people on it. And the conditions were said to be adequate. Until things took a turn for the worst, which was a year into the voyage. Which, you're like, oh, yeah, but then they get to go home. Well, that's what they thought too. The ship that was supposed to come get them after the year never showed up. Now you're probably thinking, did they forget? No. They tried to get to Wrangel Island, but they had to turn back due to impenetrable ice. So I don't know if that was poor planning on their part, they should have left sooner, or if it was just bad weather at the time. But the ship who was supposed to come get them, it did not come get them. Not this time. Their rations had nearly run out because they didn't think they thought they were leaving after a year. And game was also very slim this time of year, like for hunting. So they're trying to make what's left of their bear rations. They're trying to make it last. They're trying to get what game they could. They're just trying to survive because they realize this ship isn't coming to get us. Now the situation turned dire, well, in January of 1923. And this was months after their expected return trip. They were dropped off September 1921. I assume it's supposed to be picked up September of 1922. So now we're into 1923, January to be exact, and things are horrible right now. They were all literally starving, and Knight, who was one of the 28-year-olds, was very, very ill. It says now that he had scurvy, most likely, but they didn't really know what it was at the time. Which honestly, I'm kind of surprised none of the others got scurvy. Because I mean, he's obviously lacking like fruits, vegetables, like important nutrients. But they had to also be lacking the same nutrients. So he had scurvy. Okay, let's move on with our lives. Now, due to this, they got no food. Mr. Knight's got scurvy. Like, it's freezing. It's just not a good situation. The decision was made due to this that on January 28th of 1923, Crawford, who was the head of the voyage, Moyer, and Gale would set out on foot to cross the ice to Siberia to try to get help. Now, I also had the thought, like, why are they walking to Siberia? Why not Alaska? Well, if you look at the map, Siberia is closer. I forgot the exact mileage, but it was about 100, slightly less than 100 miles. So not an easy walk, nothing I would want to do, but Alaska was hundreds more. So I could see why they chose Siberia over Alaska. So they set out on that mission to try to get some help, leaving Ada and the scurvy-infested Knights as the only two people on this island. Now, for 6 months, because remember, they ain't gonna cross the 100 miles in a day. So for 6 months, Ada would do all the work of all the men combined, whilst caring for Knight. And it stated in 1924, she was, quote, doctor, nurse, companion, servant, huntswoman, and woodsman all in one, end quote. And doing her actual duties of sewing stuff. Granted, that probably took lower priority, but I mean, gotta stay warm, especially the sick dude. And during this time, when Ada's doing everything, she's taking care of Knight to keep him alive, it was said he treated her horribly, which I'd slap that man. He was like constantly criticizing everything she did to keep him alive, and particularly criticizing anything she did to try to help him get better. Which I can probably understand, maybe he's frustrated, he can't do anything. But now is not the time to bite the hand that literally feeds you. The only hand who can feed you. So let's take it back a bit, Knight. But despite doing everything she could, he would pass away. He would die on June 23rd of 1923. And we know this exact date because Ada recorded it in her diary. Like the journey journal, which just became her diary because she is now the only one on this island. Because at this time, the other 3 men have not returned. There is no sign of them. So she is now utterly alone. Oh, okay, not utterly alone. I always forget, and I feel bad, the expedition cat's named Victoria. She had Victoria with her. It's amazing the cat survived, but I'm guessing cat doesn't need as many calories as, like, you know, a human. And I guess worst comes to worst, the cat could be a snack. Also, side note, I'm sorry to get off track, but apparently ship cats were very popular, like, since forever, until, what was it, modern times? I think it was 70s. Like, everyone always had a ship cat. And there's some pretty famous ship cats. So would you like me to do a video on some famous ship cats? It's not true crimey and it's not a badass lady, but badass kitty. Just let me know if you want a video on ship cats. I just found it very intriguing. Anyway, back to what we're actually talking about today. So Ada would continue to do everything she could to survive and, you know, keep little Vic the cat alive as well. Now, I also want to know, I forgot to write it down, when Ada was accepted on this crew, like everyone had designated jobs. Ada was basically just sewing and like doing some cooking, which is still a lot of work, but she didn't know how to hunt or anything along those lines. She taught herself how to hunt. She taught herself everything to survive. Like, she taught herself how to hunt polar bears. This lady is badass. And I do want to say, luckily, help did come a couple months later. The help would come on August 19th of 1923, which is nearly 2 years since they were dropped off to claim the island. So that is the main story, but now let's get into the aftermath of that. So when Ada returned, she was hailed as a real, quote, female Robinson Crusoe, end quote. I'm not going to get into that, who that is, but it's just kind of you probably know who it is. Now, she used the money she was given, which was less than promised, by the way, which annoys me. She was the only survivor. Come on, give her the money. But she used the money she was given and she had saved up, and she took back Bennett from the orphanage. She got her son back. And she moved to Seattle to treat his tuberculosis. So Seattle must seem like a warm, hot paradise for her after those 2 years. Now, I also want to mention, Ada was a quiet person. She hated the media frenzy around her during this time. She said she was just a mother who needed to get back to her son, and that's how she survived and made it home. Now, whilst in Seattle, I believe, I don't know if it was in Alaska, but she would remarry and have another son named Billy. And somewhere down the line, Ada would return back to Alaska, the Arctic, I don't know where exactly in Alaska, to live out the rest of her days. And unfortunately, Bennett never fully recovered from his illnesses, and he would pass away in 1975. He was about 58, 59 years old. So he did beat the tuberculosis, which he saved the money for and went through hell to get. But it's just, he had so many residual issues. He just did not live a super long life. So Ada did outlive her son Bennett, and she would eventually pass on May 29th of 1983 at the age of 85. And I don't know the cause of death. I assume maybe just older age, something along the lines, but I don't know for sure. And I do want to know, I didn't see anything really on her second husband. I know his last name I think was Johnson, and her second son Billy, his name was Billy Johnson. And her son Billy, he would go on to marry, have, I believe, a kid, and he actually passed away in 2003 at 78 years old. And I saw that his wife, who they lived in actually one of the Carolinas, I believe it was North Carolina, so not Alaska. He wanted someplace warm. But I saw that Billy's wife passed away last year. And they have a lot of grandkids, I think even some great-grandkids at this point. So Ada's bloodlines, it's out there. I'm not saying that's necessarily important. What someone should strive to do is just have a bloodline. But when someone's that awesome, I feel like you want some of them to live on. You know what I mean? Like me, my bloodline doesn't need to live on. But she's a cool lady. Yeah. Now, I do want to say, even though it seems like a decent, like, happily ever after, quote unquote, Ada's remaining years were filled with, quote, pervasive sadness and poverty, end quote. Even with that media frenzy around her, she never financially benefited from any of it. She was paid less than promised, as I stated. She never got paid for the tiniest amount of media she did do, like at the very beginning when she got back. And she never received any money from the books written about her and the voyage. Now, I do want to say, the book I mentioned at the beginning, the book I recommended, it came out 20 years after her death. So I don't think that could be included in the benefiting off of her but not giving her any money if it came out 20 years after she passed. I guess they probably could have given money to Billy, because Bennett was also gone at this time. But I don't no, but I do want to throw that out there. The book I did recommend isn't necessarily one of those books because it came out 2 decades after she passed. And Stephenson, that sneaky little guy, the one who didn't go on the voyage but funded it and everything, he profited off the story. And the person who was like captaining the ship that rescued her, they both profited off of this tragic story, while Ada saw none of it. And smear campaigns would come out against Ada in later years, saying she purposely killed Knight. Not necessarily like killing, like, you know, smothered a pillow on him or something, but like she just kind of abandoned him as like, sorry sucker. So that came out later in her life, and that just sucks. I mean, you can actually, I'm gonna link it below, but you can read her diary online. I read through some of it, but to think she purposely killed him is insane. He would not have survived another 6 months if that was the case. There was no way. He maybe would have made maybe a month if she just stopped caring for him. There's no way he would have made it half a year if she just was abandoning him. And lastly, I do want to mention the 3 men, Crawford, Mauer, and Gale. They were never seen again. The ones who crossed the ice to try to get to Siberia, they were never seen again, never heard from again, and their remains have never been found. It's just been assumed they were lost to the frozen tundra. And that is the story about Ada Blackjack. She is a badass lady. She went through a lot, and I feel like there might be more that I'm missing, but it's probably in the book. But that is it for today. Let me know what you thought, and next time you see me, it will probably be a regular true crime. I don't think I have any more badass ladies lined up currently, but I'll double check my list. Let me know what you think, and what you think of this setup. Does it look okay? But sorry for the long video, and stop leaving ladies on islands, please. It's rude. Bye, guys.